All right, so I'm joined again by Maggie today for a conversation I've really been looking forward to. Today, we're going to talk about astrology and how a little bit of Maggie's background as she is a professional astrologer, and then how we can use astrology in the awakening and healing journey. And we'll just see where this goes. Maggie, just one more thing, Maggie was the person that first made me interested in astrology. I was always probably thought it was a load of nonsense in the past. And then I remember, I definitely did. And then I remember listening to Maggie's conversation with Angela DeLulo, and I could hear she was very kind of insightful on the awakening path and a lot of clear non-dual insights. And then she was talking about astrology as well. And I think the fact that you had a PhD in sociology was also like, if somebody that has a PhD can get interested in astrology, then maybe there's something there. So that really was, I've reflected back, that was like, I really like it now. It's like, I have a lot of fun exploring astrology. And it was definitely, you were the first person that opened the door for me. So yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that because I thought that your generation is generally really open way more to this stuff than my generation, for example.
Yeah, I think it is, but I think I've noticed it recently that I think specifically the more masculine male psyche is closed off to it. I've noticed it very interesting. Like as I've made more female friends recently, I'm like, whoa, you guys are so much more open to the kind of spiritual stuff. Whereas I'll discuss it with like a male friend, and they'll be like, what the heck are you talking about? You know?
Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Okay.
so and also for me, I think a lot of around I was very like scientific as well. So like anything that seemed a bit woo woo, I was like closed off to. Where it was like, oh no, yeah, that's out there. But
Mm,
yeah.
mm.
So what I want to ask you is, how did the whole astrology thing start for you? How did you go from the PhD in sociology to astrology? I'm really curious, actually.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last time a little bit. I was a bit like you in that, I spent most of my life in academia, right? And
Yeah.
so I've always been the kind of I would describe myself as a person that sort of walks firmly with my feet on the ground, but with my
Yeah.
head in the sky. And I love the
Okay.
balance. So I was always open-minded and sort of interested in things, so-called woo-woo,
Yeah. Yeah.
to an extent.
Okay.
But actually in the last few years, I realized that I was actually way more closed-minded than I
Yeah.
than I thought I was. But astrology was definitely not on my radar, which is quite ironic because when I met an astrologer, this was probably my second reading, which I'm gonna get to.
Okay.
Um, and at that point, I was already very much into astrology
Yeah.
when I met him, and I was actually thinking of sort of coming out of the closet and actually doing it professionally and everything because I was doing it and people were telling me, oh my God, you're so good at it,
Yeah.
you seem like a natural. And I asked him, so do you think I should be doing astrology professionally, that I could do it? And he's like, do astrology, you are astrology.
I remember you
It was
saying with
like,
your charts, it was like
yeah, it's almost
written
like,
in the
I mean, it was
stars,
right.
literally.
I could kind of see it in my chart, but I think there was some kind of cognitive dissonance where it was just not
Right. Yeah.
not sinking in that actually I have three planets in the eighth house, which basically means that eighth house is related. I mean, it means all sorts of things, but eighth house in astrology is related to astrology, among
Okay.
other
Okay.
things, and occult stuff,
Okay.
or some would say like the shadow work,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of psychoanalysis, stuff like that. Um, so so the inclination was there, definitely. The inclination was there from the beginning. It's just that I went, into the academic route,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it was just like I wasn't exploring this stuff at all. And I can't really tell you because it was so freaking random, like a lot of things that happen with me. Like just
Yeah.
randomly some idea pops up and I'll just go with it. And I think
Like going to
someone,
Thailand.
Like going to Thailand. This is like, honestly, like, before my holiday, we spoke. There was no plan of going to Thailand, and all of a sudden, here I am booking a trip to Thailand in October. Yeah, very weird. So I can't remember how I decided to book a reading. I don't know. I
Okay.
don't remember what happened before that, but I must have heard something. I must have heard a friend or someone
Yeah.
I know who I sort of trust that, they're not sort of crazy,
Yeah, yeah.
or something like that, that someone must have mentioned something for me to even kind of,
Yeah.
consider it. And I remember that my birthday was coming up. And
Before you booked the reading, did you know much? Because like for me, I hadn't booked any readings, but I'd like it looked about a bunch of stuff online and that had already resonated. Do you know, like, was there anything that you're like, oh yeah, this seems kind of accurate? Or was the reading like the first, like,
I
that was your
honestly don't remember,
introduction?
Kyle. I
Okay,
really
okay.
just don't. That's actually, I probably should have sat with it before we started. Maybe something would come to me, but at this point, I have no idea how I ended up booking a reading.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I do remember I must have been already exploring it, because
Yeah.
to me that would be just too random and sort of,
Yeah.
so like I said, either I had a conversation with someone and I got curious,
Yeah.
or I was already exploring it and maybe reading some bits and pieces. Very possible. But
Yeah.
you know how it is, like the memory loops even more so after the awakening stuff. It's
Oh
just like,
yeah.
wow, like there are whole chunks of life that I can't remember
Yeah.
anymore,
Yeah, yeah.
um so I don't remember, but I remember my birthday was coming up and I thought I'm gonna get myself a birthday gift, and
Okay.
I'm just gonna find some astrologer, professional astrologer, and I'm gonna book a reading as for fun.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I actually treated it more like an entertainment, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
more
Okay.
like, oh, it's something different, I'm
Yeah.
curious enough, let's see. But I was, my attitude at the time, at least maybe a few years before that, was I was just completely dismissive of this stuff.
Mm.
Which was, when you think about like
Mm.
academic people, you'd think that, of all the people, they should be the most open-minded and
Yeah.
certainly not dismiss anything out of hand
But
for
it's
having at least minimum of knowledge about it,
yeah.
that you could say, okay, I'm informed well enough to know that this is bullshit, or like I'm
Yeah.
informed well enough to know that I know what I'm dismissing. It's not my
Yeah.
thing. I'm not gonna go there, right? But no, believe me, this is like,
It's the opposite.
ironically, ironically, this is literally the opposite. I mean, some
Literally.
of the
Yeah.
most closed-minded people are within
Yeah.
academic circles. So, but I do remember, my sister used to work as a journalist
Okay.
for a newspaper, and we laughed so much because they had these weekly astrology column,
Oh yeah.
and she told me that basically a guy who worked for the newspaper, who I think was a journalist himself, he would just literally smoke cigarettes and drink coffee in the morning on like Friday or whatever, and just make a whole lot of shit up for like these short little horoscopes.
Oh my
For
God.
he was literally making stuff up, like, no
See,
kidding.
this
They
is
did
why astrology has such a bad name. It's like because of shit
exactly,
like this.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So, this was so hilarious because he was incredibly creative. Like he was a writer, so he was just
Yeah.
coming up with all sorts of things. And I thought, oh my God, this is just like another example of like, maybe that's what a lot of astrology, in particular in horoscope magazine, like the
Mm.
magazine horoscopes and stuff like that. Maybe that's
Mm.
exactly what it is. Maybe they're all making this stuff up, and
Yeah.
it's like, so so I had absolutely no knowledge of astrology, but I was dismissive of it.
Yeah.
I just basically assumed that it's bullshit, and like I said, it's probably all made up, something like that. So that's as far as my attitude, I think,
Yeah.
astrology was like at the time. So then, fast forward, something happens. I don't. Well, you want to say
Yeah. So
something?
that no, I was gonna say. So then, what? How did the reading go? Like,
Yeah. So to fast forward, something must have clearly changed for me to be curious enough,
yeah,
to book that reading. And I actually think that I found that astrologer on YouTube.
okay.
I think he was the first astrologer that I found.
They had YouTube back in that day when you were younger. Sorry, so scratch that.
I'm just going to move on from this comment. I'm just going to pretend.
Maggie leaves the Zoom call and cancels my horoscope reading for next week.
Maggie left the meeting abruptly. Disconnection. I can't hear you anymore,
I don't
pal.
know, it's internet problems. Yeah.
Yeah, internet connection problems. Yeah, you hurt me so deeply that I can't get back to the flow.
I ruined the whole conversation. Sorry. I'm
Right.
just
So
testing the
right.
shadow.
So yes, there was YouTube. There was already
YouTube, right?
YouTube at the
Okay.
time.
Yeah,
Yes, shockingly. And I think that's how I found him. And I thought, okay, this guy seems to be speaking some sense, and
yeah.
I just booked a reading. I remember that the waiting time was really long. It was really, really
Okay.
long. So he must have been really good.
Yeah.
So I booked a reading and I sat down, and of course I had to provide like the birth data. So
Yeah.
because for appropriate for a proper rather birthday
Yeah, you need the time and
birth chart
all.
reading, you need the time. You
Yeah.
need the exact time of birth.
So this is a bit of a tangent, but this is something I wanted to ask somebody who knows a bit more about astrology. Like, I've always wondered, what if somebody doesn't know their birth time? Is there any like ways to
Yeah,
get it?
there are astrologers who actually, I mean, most astrologers could do that, I suppose, but they usually can't be bothered doing that because it takes
Yeah.
a bit of work. I mean, the longer you've been an astrologer, the easier it would be to reactify sort of to basically there is a method, which I
Okay.
can't remember the word now. But there is a method that astrologers can use to try to figure out the time of your
Oh,
birth.
really? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that there are astrologers that even sort of specialize in not just in that, but
Yeah.
they will, if you go on their website, they will say that this is something
Okay.
that they
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've always thought like if your parents didn't take down your birth time and now you want to get interested in astrology, you're kind of a bit screwed if you don't have your birth time. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's only an issue, it's like, I mean, it's only an issue. It can be a big issue because sometimes it's a case of really a few degrees,
Yeah.
a few minutes that a
Yeah.
whole chart can change,
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I had a situation actually a few times when someone had like a planet in ascendant in the first house of like 29th degree. Or 0 degree, and I had, I was like, are you sure? And I would like have to
Oh
ask a
shit.
few
Yeah.
questions, because like I said, literally a few minutes and the whole
Yeah.
chart would change. So
But you can like
um
pick up if the person like is that how you'd figure it out? Like to see if it's matches them or
yeah, there are ways because you start with the ascendant, you
okay.
go by the ascendant sign or rising sign, and
Yeah.
then Virgo ascendant is going to be very different, like Sagittarius
Right.
ascendant,
Okay.
straight away, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
so yeah, so you can go by those characters, but I don't specialize in that. I've never had
Okay.
to do
Yeah.
it, and I would never even attempt to do it because I
Yeah.
don't think I'm good enough,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
that to even attempt that. So but it is very important. I even had trouble because my mom was convinced that I was born at 8 in the morning, but I was born at 8 in the evening. So
Oh, really?
that's quite a bit of a difference, by
Yeah,
the way.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But women hormones, long time ago, blah blah blah, plus probably early onset dementia. I'm just kidding, but it's like it explains why she might get it
Yeah.
wrong. And also it was summer, so it would be still very bright at this time. So she could
Yeah.
think that I was born during the day, but no, I wasn't. So I actually found. We couldn't find my birth certificate. I don't know, but I actually had issues myself with finding the time.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
my mom kept the hospital bracelet from when I was born, the pink
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
ones
Yeah.
that, yeah, and the time was there.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's
so
what I've
that's how
been
I
trying to
figured
think
it out.
because I don't know if we have records. Like I've been trying to look for my brother because my parents took down my time, but I was like, my brother's interested in it and we don't have his time. And I was like, how do you actually find it? So yeah,
Yeah.
I was always
But
but
do
I don't
they at least know? But it's funny. It seems so obvious, but as you see with my mom, it wasn't as obvious as that. But
yeah.
are they sure that he was born? Do they have like a roundabout time?
Probably, yeah. I'm sure if I asked them, they could like give me a time of
Yeah.
day
So
ish.
that's
We could figure it
easier,
out.
It's
Yeah.
so much easier when you have at least when it's like, okay, it's evening
Okay, yeah.
or like, afternoon or morning, it's like at least if you can know
Yeah.
that, I'm sure that it's going to be super helpful to someone who knows how to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
Okay, but
right. So
anyways,
where
back
were
to
we?
your
Yeah.
reading
No, but
and
actually this is important because
yeah.
like this is one of the disclaimers that I
Mm,
always say when I meet a new client, that it's important because there's always a possibility that the time is wrong. There's
yeah,
always a
yeah.
possibility that the time is wrong, either because, if it comes from parents, every astrologer will tell you that even the mothers that were like 100% sure that this was like at this exact time, they turned out to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
The nurse, maybe you were born and then the nurse, forgot to write it straight away and
Yeah.
took a few more minutes, and that made a whole difference, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there are, and then of course there's a whole bunch of just philosophical, sort of astrological philosophical discussions around when does it even, what time actually matters. Is it the time,
Right.
when the birth,
Oh,
sort of
like when is
the birthing
when is
process
birth? Yeah.
begins, or is it
Oh,
when the
wow.
baby comes out? So there's like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are people who have time and will to discuss these things. I just go with like, what was the time that the nurse wrote down, and let's just go with it. So like, I'm
Yeah.
really not like super precious about it, but it has to be it, for that reason, I always have to say this, because if I do someone's reading and literally nothing resonates,
Mm.
or even just 50% resonates, then to me there's,
Then
if
you got to
nothing
consider
resonates,
that.
then we're definitely dealing with
Yeah.
we're either dealing with a very wrong time of birth, or we're dealing with some massive denial.
Yeah. That's the thing,
This-
right? I think that's what puts a lot of people off astrology as well, is like trying to deny, yeah, that is
right, I mean, who knows.
yeah.
For me, with all the readings that I've been doing, usually it's like 80% I'm correct,
Okay, yeah.
80%, and then 20% some things might not resonate, but that might not be due to the time or anything. That might be due to the fact that certain patterns may have played out when we were younger, but no longer play
Yeah.
out now. There are things that have been seen. There are things that we do, we mature just by virtue of age and,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of things that, then there is obviously, if I meet people who have been on a journey of awakening and they had massive shifts, then
Yeah.
that really changes the way the reading is done as well, because then we discuss things very differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Very
sense.
differently, and a lot of stuff is just seen from what some would describe, and really, I really want to underline, like, I'm not talking about some freaking hierarchy of superiority here, but there are levels
Yeah.
of so-called consciousness, and by that
Yeah.
I just mean that depending where we're at,
Mm.
um you know, we're going to be seeing ourselves and life differently. And I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
you don't have to
Yeah.
be spiritual to know that the way
Yeah.
you view yourself and your life at the age of 18 is
Yeah.
going to be different when you are, you know, in your 30s or 40s
Yeah.
or, you know, 70s, right? So so there's definitely that. And and from that point of view, which I find really fascinating, you can have two people like twins, for example, that on the
Yeah.
they will have nearly similar chart, like almost like the same chart. But and on the surface, they will be like, you know, same interests, same
Yeah.
quirks, same, you know, but a whole bunch of stuff that they have in common. But then the deeper you go, and in particular, sort of throughout life, as they get older, like two completely different people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's an
Completely
interesting.
different niche. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's very, very interesting because
Yeah.
there is definitely, this is where those levels of consciousness comes in, because if you have a twin that's say awoke to their true nature, whatever you want to call it, and the other twin didn't, then from that point of view, you know, the how they're going to deal with certain challenges or you know, stuff like that, even though they may be dealing with similar challenges, it will be very, very different. One will be crushed by the challenge and the other will be like, okay, let's bring it on, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
let's see, right? So yeah, so it's fascinating. So right there, to me, there isn't, even in those cases where we have like twins, there really isn't. The chart may be the same, but there's multiple other things that you know, we need to take into account that make the two trajectories and two people very different still and unique in their own ways, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. Okay, so my first, should we go back to the first
Yeah.
reading?
Let's do it. I'm still curious. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, so I remember this. I think he must have known just by seeing my chart that I'm a talker, that once you get me started and there's like no stopping me. So he said, I'm just gonna talk.
Smart.
Very, very smart. Because he knew, and I knew that just by seeing my ascendant, he knew that I will have a millions of questions. I will want to
Yeah.
share my story, and not just one, possibly, you know, more.
Yeah.
And he'll be finished. He'll basically not get to speak at all, and I'm
Yeah.
basically going to be paying to hear myself speak. So,
Wait, so what indicates that? Was that like the Sagittarius ascendant or
Sagittarius rising, yeah,
like rising?
Sagittarius
Okay, yeah,
ascendant,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I must check what my
Um,
father's rising.
he's Sagittarius ascendant.
No, I must check because he talks a
Oh,
lot.
because he
So
loves to talk. You that explains because you have conjunction of Mercury and Sun, so in your chart. So and Sun represents father, in
okay.
astrology. So someone who really loves to talk and communicate. You know what I
Oh
mean? It's
yeah.
like literally part of their intrinsic part of their identity. The talking, the thinking, the
Yeah, yeah.
intellectual.
Is that me
You
or is
know
that you
that
can see that in my chart
it
for
can
what?
be both. Yeah, I see it in your chart, but I
Okay.
can
It could
use it
be.
as a way to see something about your father.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you know, yeah.
Okay.
Um, so right, so there's that, and yeah, so he said, you know, you're not gonna, I'm
No
gonna
talking.
talk. And honestly, Kyle, I sat throughout with my jaw on the floor,
Yeah, yeah.
like I honestly I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just
Yeah.
couldn't compute. Like here I was, you know, kind of like, "Oh, okay, let's have some woo-woo fun," you know, and my, you know, birthday entertainment, whatever. And here's guy basically, it was like listening to someone reading my biography or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I honestly I just couldn't, and he went into such detail, like even the stuff like to do with my childhood and the
Mm.
particular issues
Oh yeah.
that yeah that were going on and how I was affected by them, you know, things like that. So I mean it was very detailed. um so that was just like, wow, how is this possible? Like, this guy
Yeah.
knows nothing about me, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's just
Yeah.
nothing, zero. He only has my date of birth and time of birth, and it's like, how is it possible to know so much
Yeah.
about someone, you
That
know?
was like my exact when I was like, oh, okay, wow, there's actually something. Yeah, I was also like,
Yeah.
I didn't even engage with a professional astrologer, so I'm sure you get a lot more kind of personal
Mm.
detail there. But just from doing it for the first time with my actual birth time on like a couple of websites, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I can't deny this. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, wow, you know, so
That was shocking to me, but also what was um this is when I discovered for the first time that such thing, because like I knew about, you know, the sun signs, like I knew sun
yeah,
signs, what they are, and, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, I am a Cancer sun,
okay, yeah,
right? So, and I could relate, like, you know, whenever I read something, even just generally, even like in those horoscopes, like, you know, the typical sort of characteristics that you come across about Cancer, right?
yeah,
I could relate, obviously, to the sort of key characteristics, but I don't know. It didn't really feel like my personality, you know? It's like I was like, okay, I can't really relate
yeah.
too much. And that's even though I have 3 planets in Cancer.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I mean planets. I mean Sun and Moon and Mercury in Cancer.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, uh, you know, I should be able to relate to
yeah,
Cancer even more for that
yeah.
reason. So like I said, there are aspects of Cancerian aspects that for
Mm,
sure, you know, I could relate. But in terms of like my general interest, my
mm,
personality, the focus, that's the sort of what sort of dictates where I'm going in life in terms of what I'm drawn to and things like that. You know, I really couldn't. Like for example, you'd think like being super family oriented, Cancer, first thing, like
mm.
family oriented,
Yeah,
right?
like caring and nurturing, and yeah,
I can't say that I'm particularly family
yeah,
oriented.
yeah,
I don't have children. I
yeah,
never wanted to have children.
yeah,
Um, for no particular reason. It was just like it sort of didn't come up for
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Um, you know, I mean I like babies for like a very limited period of time that I can like hand them back in to the
Just
parents.
get the good stuff and let the parents deal with the
Yeah,
rest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, so I like children, and I'm actually apparently I'm very good with children. So
Okay.
I don't know, maybe because I always treat them like equals. I talk to them like we were equals. I never talk to them like they're children.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you know, like a friend of mine, she had a toddler, and she was just, you know how toddlers sometimes fake like cry, like they
yeah,
fake
yeah,
cry. You know,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
nothing really. And I just looked at her, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean? And she's like, she was just so baffled by this reaction that like not only nobody was paying attention, but I was like, what are you doing?
yeah.
You know
Because that's
what
probably
I
what
mean?
they play into, that everybody's gonna treat them a certain way, like
Right?
as a child, so you can play into that. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, and she
exactly.
was like so baffled by it.
You
She
shocked her.
stopped, you know, and then we just like got on with things, you know. It was just so, it was bizarre. Like, why do you talk to a child like that? You know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's like she's an adult that couldn't understand or anything like that, you know. But
yeah,
anyway, you know, so right there, you know, in terms of like typical concern, you know, looking after the family, very family
yeah, yeah.
oriented. You know, home is definitely like my space. I love home.
Mm,
You know, it's home is like my sanctuary, I must say,
yeah,
you know, and very much like my retreat place, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm very hermit-like, way
yeah.
more than people think that I am, you
Oh,
know, in
really?
that sense. Yeah. Um, maybe this is why like when I come to contact and I socialize and it's like
Gotta get it
bleh, you
all
know,
out.
it's like, yeah, you know,
It's
it's like
been
full
building up.
on engagement and then like I have to recover for like a week,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But yeah, so you know, so I couldn't relate to Cancer that much, you know,
Mm,
like to those
mm.
like typical characteristics. And then he introduced me to this, he started talking to me about the ascendant, you know, about the
Okay.
rising sign. And he said it's Sagittarius. And I'm like, I had no idea that such thing existed. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about that. And then he started telling me what that means, and it was like tick, 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 tick. Like he was
Okay.
literally describing my interests, my
Yeah.
personality, just my general attitude to life. I mean, it's all in the ascendant. It really is.
So would you say the ascendant's like a greater reflection of somebody's personality than the sun, then, or?
Yeah, it depends. Ascendant to me is very much again, it depends from which school of thought you're coming at it. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Because again, it's humble pie number 112 when it comes to astrology was really just realizing, how can you can't actually even talk about such thing as astrology as
Mm,
like this
mm,
one thing,
mm.
that means the same thing to all
Yeah.
people.
Right.
You know
That's a
what I
good
mean?
point. Yeah.
I mean, other than like the basics of like, okay, the study of the stars,
Mm,
blah, 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 whatever. In that sense, yes, of course.
yeah.
But
But
I
it's a
mean,
massive umbrella term.
oh
Like,
my
yeah.
God. I mean, there are so many schools of thought. Even,
Yeah.
when I talk about the birth chart, the house system, the so-called house system, there's
Yeah.
several of them. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
different schools of thought, astrological thought, will use different houses, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, for example, the way evolutionary astrology is going to talk about the sun, for
Mm.
example, is going to be different to how Hellenistic astrology, which is my background.
Okay.
Um,
What's
you
the
know,
like the most mainstream? Is it like which school? Like if you go onto a
yeah, the most common house system it's called Placidus.
yeah,
This is
that's
the
what I was
this is
thinking.
yeah,
Yeah,
so this
yeah.
is the most, whereas Hellenistic astrology use whole sign system,
Okay, so it's different.
which is different. And then evolutionary astrology, I think, uses two or three different. So now you
Okay.
will have different astrologers within, say, evolutionary astrology that
Right.
will
Okay, it
use
still goes
different house.
further. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There are more and more astrologers that draw from different schools, you
Yeah.
know.
Right. Okay, that
Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
and then of course you have Vedic astrology as well, which
Yes,
is
yeah.
closest to Hellenistic astrology,
Okay.
right? Or what I call ancient astrology. So that's but then there are people better than I am when it comes to like the details around like
Yeah.
technicalities around that than I am, but I was drawn. I love whole sign system. I just love whole sign system, and whenever I looked up other house systems, I was just like, what the hell is happening here?
What's
You
this?
know what I mean? I
Is
just
that
couldn't.
is that the system that your first reading? What system was that in?
No,
Or
he actually used Placidus,
okay.
which was, it still was, you know, to me, the way I see it, and again, you know me enough that I really don't sweat
Hmm.
the sort of details and making the details to be such a big deal, and like,
Yeah.
being just overly kind of invested in that sort of stuff. Same with like spirituality, like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so happy to explore different traditions and schools of thought, but
Mm.
like I have zero investment. Is
Mm.
my one rule is what works.
Which is the most important, like in
It's
anything,
literally,
to be
to me,
honest.
I don't care what modality,
Yeah.
school of thought, tradition, whatever. Does it work for you? Does it make
Yeah.
any difference?
Yeah.
Great. Same with astrology. I would, if someone, for example, has a dilemma as to like which one to go with, should I go with Placidus? Should I go with whole sign system? However,
Mm.
why don't you go and have
Mm.
readings with both?
Yeah, and see what resonates
astrologers
the
and then
most.
see what
Yeah.
resonates, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
to me that's what it's about, rather than going into which one is correct,
Yeah.
which one is superior, which one, like, I don't care. I care what resonates with you, what helps you. You know, that's all I care about, you know. And a lot of it is just those differences are not going to be massive, I would say, for the most part. There's one astrologer that I really respect, and she actually is super knowledgeable, and she also teaches astrology. So she's been doing this for years, and she was working with Placidus.
Okay.
And then she decided to study ancient / Hellenistic astrology. So she moved to the whole sign system. So now she was knowledgeable in both, and she could see the difference when seeing clients and then repeating clients. And basically she said that between the two, that both were incredibly useful, but the one that was most accurate was the whole sign system.
Okay.
So she stayed with the whole sign system.
So your astrology is better than the rest.
Of course it is.
You have the better system.
It's superior. And anyway, I'm the best astrologer in the entire world, and I'm correct.
Exactly.
And my interpretations are the only correct ones. And you know, just so you know.
Yeah. Just put that in the title of the video.
Yeah. And I watch these guys that have this they call it like the most moral podcast. They're comedians, you know, they call it like the most moral podcast in the world. They're just so funny.
The humblest as well.
The humblest, the most moral and the humblest, so I was completely hooked. I was, you know, that reading was like, and it was so funny because he actually said things that I absolutely could not resonate with.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, which is another great kind of lesson for everybody, that just because something doesn't resonate straight away doesn't mean that it's not gonna become clear, for example, after a while.
Some time.
In particular when it comes to birth chart reading, because it's different with transits, which are more immediate, right? Whereas the birth chart, you know, like we're looking at your entire life, right? Life trajectory and stuff like that. So some of the things.
Was this like in your awakening kind of journey? Was this still very early on, or?
So this was this is a good question. Hold on, because it's actually kind of relevant. So as you know, my first awakening happened when, like, I didn't consider myself a spiritual person. I didn't even call it an awakening. I had no idea this was considered an awakening. And you know, and I was in academic background.
It was from that book, I think, if I remember your conversation with Angela, like that was, you read this one book and then that was your non-spiritual introduction.
Yeah. So even the guy who I worked with one-on-one was called that was his title, transformative coach. Wasn't a guru, but he was not coach-like either, because he wasn't telling me to like work on myself or fix myself or improve myself or anything like that. He was just constantly talking about thought. The nature of thought, and like seeing that we live in a thought created reality and all of that. So one might say, well, isn't that spiritual? But to me, it was just so pragmatic. He was so pragmatic that, and also he came from his entire family, also like physicists and like so my point is that there was no spiritual other than talking about thought. Beyond that, there was no like talk about awarenesses and consciousnesses, like none of that, you know what I mean? So, you know, and I didn't consider myself spiritual. He didn't consider himself a spiritual teacher either. Although I see him way more as a spiritual teacher than a coach. To this day. You know, so that was sort of my where I was at. But this was when the first Berkshire reading happened. This was years after the first awakening.
Okay, so you already
years
had
after
the
my
first
awakening,
shift,
right? Because so he said to me, he said, you're going to be a spiritual teacher.
Oh, really?
And yes, and he said it with such certainty that I even got like annoyed, a little bit annoyed, because I'm like, okay, I'm not here really for predictions.
Oh, yeah. It's just okay. Just step
Like,
back, man.
yeah, tell me about my character, tell me, like, I'm not really here for predictions. And I laughed. I just laughed. I was
Yeah.
like, and I said, I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but it's like I'm literally the last spiritual person like that you could probably meet, maybe this week or this month or whatever. Even and I said, even this reading, it's like not like me. It's sort of, I'm not really into this stuff, and everything. And he laughed.
He's like, okay, sure. Look at your chart.
Yeah, okay, sure. And it was like so it was actually hilarious because I thought, okay, so until that point, I was like, wow, like John the floor, like tick tick tick, everything. And then he mentioned that like spirituality, being spiritual teacher, 100%, and I laughed and I'm like, I mean, at that point, Kyle, it was like you telling me that I'm going to become an astronaut, like in a few years' time, and then
Yeah.
go to the moon or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
kidding you.
Yeah.
That's how.
I can see that, like, for myself as well, though. If someone had said that the spiritual word too early on, I would have been like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you. I am absolutely not exaggerating. At that point, the idea that I would be into spirituality,
Yeah.
let alone like that, and let alone being a spiritual teacher or anything like that. I mean, it was so laughable. I could only laugh because it was just like, I think, okay, this was like correct and accurate, but like this one maybe not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's like,
This is where astrology is
you know what I
astrology,
mean? Yeah, it's like, okay, whatever, moving on. Like,
Yeah.
what's next? Yeah. And he said to me, and I remember two things he said. And he said, because you have one-sided view of what that means.
Oh, okay.
Right? So he said, you have this image of like, you probably have this image of like, the guru sitting with like robes and crystals hanging and, whatever.
Yeah.
On the top of the mountain, and so no wonder that you can't even like picture yourself or go or even go in that direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then he said, just he said, I can't really think of like many spiritual teachers at the moment other than Marianne Williamson. Look at her, like she doesn't wear robes, she doesn't, she meets like regular people. She's,
Yeah. Did you know? I don't know who that is. Did you know who that was when he said that?
Yeah, I knew who she was.
Yeah. Okay.
Marianne Williamson is, I would say, I'm not sure I would call her spiritual teacher, but I think people would call her that. But she became famous through making the Course in Miracles.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of A Course in Miracles.
I think that, like, don't quote me on that, but I think that that's how she became famous, that she made the Course in Miracles way more kind of known to more people, and she ended up on Oprah.
Oh, wow.
Then
Okay,
she
so pretty
became
big.
like this massive name, like
Right.
she was like the bunch of like people like Wayne Dyer. You don't know Wayne Dyer either? Well, do you know Hay House?
Yeah, I've heard of Louise Hay.
Right. So Louise Hay, Hay
Yeah.
House Publishing House.
Yes.
This was a whole bunch of teachers like Marianne Williamson, Wayne Dyer, and all sorts of other teachers that came like from her. Like they were associated with Hay House for a very, very long time. Maybe still are. I don't know. I mean, Wayne Dyer is no longer with us, but Marianne Williamson is. So, and then she wrote loads of other books and like. But I think she comes from a very religious kind of also background. I don't know, although she's Jewish. So, I mean, I don't know. But I definitely know that she's connected. She's massively connected to the Course of Miracles.
Yeah.
So he brought her as an example, as like, not the typical robes and,
Yeah, yeah.
guru chanting, whatever, yoga, blah, 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 meditation practices, stuff like that. So, but still, it's like, no, mate,
Yeah.
that's like
No,
not
it's
the
so
point.
funny. Like exactly like you said, like the S word has such a like a projection in the mind before we realize, like as you said, the other
Yeah,
side of it. Where the same with me, I would never even used to use the word. Like I was interested in Sam Harris, and then he would say something along spirituality, and I was only interested in it because I was like, this guy has a scientific
yeah,
background. So, but before that, it would have also been robes and what is this stuff?
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So, but no, I mean, honestly, Kyle, it really, well, I'm not joking at all. It really, what he was saying sounded to me like even the fact that spirituality would like become this big thing for me or something I would lean into or explore or whatever. No, it was just
Yeah.
and he was right. I was definitely having my idea of spirituality was like yogis, people who travel to India, people who go to retreats, dress a certain way,
Yeah.
definitely do yoga, definitely do some kind of dedicated some kind of spiritual practice, stuff like that, so
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure this was my image of spiritual people,
Yeah.
so I was definitely not
Yeah.
those people. So
Yeah. So oh, wait,
and
I've got a question that I think is would be quite cool. Like if somebody's watching this and they're having that image, like we're
mm-hmm,
saying spiritual and all of this and that.
mm-hmm,
Well, to be honest, if
mm-hmm.
they've gotten this far in the conversation with all the astrology, they're probably a little bit more open minded.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
what would you say is like the other side of like spirituality that mind doesn't see, if that makes sense? Like our mind imagines spirituality as all of that, like the yogi in the mountains, and then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know, just I'm just thinking to help, because I can imagine myself watching this as well, and like the S word being like a big trigger, like it was for us, in the past.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know,
mean
do you have
there are different ways of talking about it because again, for some, like I said, spirituality is going to be very connected to a specific type of people
right?
with specific lifestyle,
Yeah,
that like is called spiritual. So like I said,
yeah,
drinking matcha lattes and
yeah,
green
yeah,
juices and going to
yeah.
retreats and yeah, so there's like this whole.
That's like the more like materialistic spirituality though, like on
And
the
that's also very much true.
yeah,
If someone wants to, I think there's a lot of spirituality like that out there. If
yeah,
not,
yeah,
I would say most of it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That's why we all
So,
think of that when we think of spirituality. Is like
right.
that's what we
And
all see. Yeah,
so, we really need to make a distinction between spirituality and awakening,
yeah, yeah,
because
exactly.
to me, they're connected, but they can be two very different
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
and if people who are listening to this really want to have their view of spirituality of that kind of more lifestyle like stuff,
mm.
um and they want to have that view crushed
Mm.
and dismantled in a drastic way, then I really recommend books by Jed McKenna. Who again, I don't want to go into like, I don't actually, nobody actually knows who Jed
Yeah,
McKenna is.
right.
There's like, which by the way, I think is one of the most genius things about the whole thing, that he's
I
actually
love it.
not real,
Yeah.
not a real person, but
Are you busy
it's
promoting your own books currently?
no.
Are you sure you're not Jed? Guys, read my
Oh my
books.
God. Let me tell you, I would be very happy to say, "Oh, I was. I'm the Jet
That
McKenna."
was me.
Seriously, because it is one of the to me, not all three, because there's three. It's like
Yeah.
trilogy. I would say the first one and the second one, but I think the first one the most. But I'm not 100% sure because I've read them such a long time ago. But
Okay.
this is someone who really makes the distinction you know what I mean? Because like a lot of people can be, for example, into say yoga and a particular type of yoga, Kriya yoga, and they will consider themselves spiritual. Fine. But they will also consider themselves awake
Yeah, yeah.
just
But
by virtue of being committed to that sort of practice and so on,
yeah.
right? So
but there's
but
still
that does
very
not
much an
necessarily,
individual that's intact. Like,
right?
yeah,
There are many spiritual teachers who've
yeah,
had insights, have amazing knowledge, do amazing work, and
yeah,
help a lot of people who are not awake
yeah, yeah,
themselves, right? And again, I'm not saying this as like, so it means nothing other than like a reference, just as a reference point. I'm not talking, because I really don't like these conversations about awake and awake as that means, you know, worse
yeah,
or less than or better than. That's not what I'm talking
yeah,
about, but I'm just talking about facts,
yeah.
that
But I think we've
there's
covered that in our previous conversations. Like, if
yeah,
anybody wants to know,
yeah.
we've spoken about that. There's no
But I think
tradition. Yeah.
for me the greatest and the most important message as far as this topic is concerned, because again we could go like for hours just about what you've just started, by the way.
I know. I'm like, shit. Why did I go down here again?
Yeah, I'm used to it by now, because I do the same. But basically, the most important thing I would say, particularly for someone who's like sort of entering this area, of spirituality, that really to awake, you don't even have to be spiritual. You
Yeah,
don't have to be reading spiritual books. You don't
yeah,
have to have spiritual lifestyle. You don't have to leave your friends. You don't have to become part of the community. I'm not saying that stuff might happen as a
yeah,
result of awakening or being on a journey. But for me, this was actually my first awakening is such a testament to that I was this, like
yeah,
I said, I very, pragmatic, very, academic, academically oriented. I did not consider myself spiritual, didn't have that kind of lifestyle, knew nothing about awakening.
yeah.
If anything, I've read by then, I think I've read some few books, local spiritual books, and I was totally put off, because I really felt that this was the kind of spirituality that I saw as like exclusive. This is for a certain type of people. This is not for ordinary people like myself.
Yeah,
Because I couldn't even relate to the language. You know what I mean? I couldn't, like, that alone just put me off.
yeah. It's not very
So,
accessible. Yeah,
right, so it didn't look accessible, it
yeah,
looked exclusive,
yeah,
or like,
yeah,
so to me this is definitely a type of spirituality that exists and is still very much there. What I'm saying is that there's a whole lot more, and that you don't have to understand that kind of language in order to realize who you are and to
yeah,
just find that, what I call, like, the freedom with capital F,
yeah, yeah,
so that would be way more important message than like trying to define what spirituality actually is or
yeah,
anything like that,
yeah.
because
It's
it's
true.
so many
Exactly.
things for so many different people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
true. That's what I love. Although, like when I met you, but it's cool because there's the awakening and like the deeper kind of, all the shifts. But then because then there's also people that don't talk about the more quote unquote spiritual stuff like
Mm-hmm.
astrology and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool to be able to explore that stuff from the space of like the deeper insights. Like kind of
Oh
what we
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
and from from the background I came from, it was more all the other stuff. It was the non-spiritual spirituality, which was just like the awakening. And then I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wait, but all of this stuff is relevant as well. Like, this is pretty cool, like a whole different world. So
Right. Because
yeah,
then you can come across non-duality,
yeah,
right? And again, you'd think that non-duality means the same thing to all people, but
yeah,
that's not true, because within non-duality, you're going to have different schools of, again, non-dual thought, so to speak, and then you're going to have different individuals,
yeah,
who see it differently.
yeah,
And we also spoke about that there are certain non-dual circles or groups of people that they would not listen to me as a person who is qualified to speak about awakening,
mm,
because I could not possibly know anything about awakening,
mm,
because I
mm,
do astrology. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that
mm.
I'm coming from like the non-duality, so even though I don't, but
Yeah,
it's the closest to, yeah. I don't come from anywhere, and that's probably the best part
The
of my
best.
journey, that I've never really
Exactly.
identified with any one
Yeah.
group or tradition or anything. You know, but I know for the fact that because many people contacted me, you know, also after the conversation with Angelo, because quite a few people mentioned like they couldn't believe that they heard someone talk about astrology on Angelo's podcast
Yeah,
or YouTube,
yeah, I'm
right?
not surprised.
So
Yeah.
so many of them were probably like almost like a cognitive dissonance. He was like, what the
Yeah.
hell is going on here? You know, wait a minute. I thought like this is illusion. So and here she's doing astrology and talking
Yeah.
about like this, like what? You know? So, but
That's exactly my
again,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I completely get that. And I
Yeah.
completely get that. And I think what I let's put it this way. What I don't like, even though I've done it myself, okay, is when people are making claims about astrology, generally speaking, or making claims about astrology in the context of non-duality or awakening, but they have absolutely no clue what astrology actually is.
Right. That, yeah, exactly.
Right, so they operate on assumptions or their ideas about astrology. Like, for example, because let's face it, there's so much of what is called like pop astrology. I mean, that's like the whole other branch of branch. I mean, it's not even a freaking branch of
Yeah, it's not
astrology,
even a.
but I don't know what it is, but it is something, and it's big.
Yeah.
Okay, it's actually big, and it's everywhere, and and I have no problem with that, honestly. Like, again, I'm so not invested, you know, in
Yeah.
this stuff in any kind of way, in or maybe in a way that many people are. You know, I don't care, but a lot of it does do this service to astrology, because
Yeah.
then on those bases people think, oh, it's just about personality, or it's just about sun signs, and it's all just like bullshit, you know, and it's so superficial and
Yeah. And
blah
it's just
blah blah
about
blah blah.
compatibility. Like, oh, is this sun sign match with that sun sign and all of that?
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Like, honestly, I actually heard a true story of someone not giving a chance to someone else based on the fact that they have a sun sign that apparently is not compatible
Yeah. Yeah.
with her sun sign. And I was like, wow, that's just unbelievable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, sun sign versus the entire birth chart and all the planets and everything, it's like, you know, sun sign is only just it's just one aspect
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what makes this character called Kyle or
Yeah.
Maggie, you know,
Yeah.
and so on, right? So
It's that's fine. It's funny though, because a friend and I were joking about similar thing recently though, because I told you that I met somebody recently, and then we were looking at like we were just talking about astrology, because I don't have a lot of friends my age that are interested in astrology. And he was like, "Oh no, it's not going to work because you're a Pisces and she's an Aries, and because he's a Cancer, right?" So we kind of like yeah, I mean, again, like it's just the sun signs, but we kind of has a few conversations around that, and I was like, bro, just but it was funny. There was we were having this whole conversation around like the sun sign compatibility,
yeah,
and
yeah, 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 yeah,
it's like in
yeah.
my head a little bit where
So
I was like, I don't know if it is gonna work out. Yeah.
that's hilarious. By the way, if someone wants to seriously think about if they want to explore compatibility between two people, like properly, then there is the whole branch of astrology called synastry. Or
I
it's
came
not
ac-
even it's
yeah,
maybe not a branch. I wouldn't call it a branch, but it's like it's a type of astrology that takes into account birth charts,
right,
whole birth
right, yeah,
charts
yeah,
of two people,
yeah,
puts it
exactly,
together, and then even within that there are different types, and you know there are astrologers that are qualified and specialize just in
yeah,
that. So if someone is genuinely like interested in exploring compatibility,
yeah,
not just based on sun signs. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
honestly, it's like I can't even comment on that because it's just like what. Um,
But that's what I was looking at as well. Was I was like, okay, but is there anything that does birth chart analysis? And then I also came
Yeah,
across
so like I
synastry.
said, even though I could do synastry and I know how to do synastry, I don't do that at all because everybody has to do what they're good at. You know what I
I
mean?
feel like
And
it's any field where it's like there's so many different
like in any
areas,
field,
and it's
yeah.
like you'll have your area that you specialize in, or that you enjoy the most.
Yeah, but but like I said, I understand why people are suspicious. I understand why people have doubts. I understand. I even understand why there seems to be incompatibility between non-duality or awakening and the use of astrology. I can even understand why that's there. But like I said, for me, it's always worth like just learn more, get well informed, like I
That's the
didn't.
thing. Yeah.
So now I'm being, such a smart, here just basically spewing wisdom, and telling you what to do.
Yeah, guys, be
No,
better than Maggie. Don't be like
be
Maggie.
better. Yeah, be better. Yeah. Be better, definitely. And educate yourself about astrology properly.
Yeah.
And maybe I can give you some ideas of books maybe
Yeah.
later on. So maybe you can
Yeah.
put them in your in a description
Yeah,
in case someone was looking for some info, because there are quite a few books. So get an idea, and if it's something that feels right and good and resonates with you, then explore further. And if it doesn't, it doesn't,
Yeah.
And also, again, I'm not gonna go into this because this is like not really my area of expertise, and I don't really know enough to really discuss it in detail in terms of like the science bit. But to me, actually, all I'm gonna say is that actually astrology to me is very much maybe not a science, but it's arrived at by scientific means, which is basically like through empiricism. Yeah, it's an empirical science, right? So in that sense, right? Because we're talking about just like with every methodology that you use for research, you need to have methodology created in such a way that constructed in such a way that when you do the research and follow that methodology, you're going to arrive to the same or very similar conclusions, right? So I mean, that's why you have all these different characteristics of different planets, and that's why if you go to 3 astrologers, even if they represent 3 different people, 3 different astrological schools of thought, whatever, there will be plenty of commonalities that they will share with you. Maybe they will share it differently, maybe their style will differ, maybe they'll convey it in a different way, but they will point to a whole bunch of things that all astrologers will say, but different astrologers will focus on different things, and on different angles. And that's the difference, right? But in that sense, it's I can't seem any more empirically scientific than that. That you follow that same model, you follow the same knowledge, and you arrive to the same or very similar conclusions. So so I couldn't see anything more empirical, scientifically speaking, than that. So but like I said, and then there's a lot of we don't even know that we actually inherit sort of almost, we're not even conscious how much we inherit from like what our parents thought of astrology, or the culture or group. Like for example, if someone grew up Catholic, then astrology is like, are you I mean, it's like the worst thing, you know what I mean? It's like
stuff.
the devil stuff, evil stuff, anything magic, anything, all sorts of things. So it's always good to be aware of when I'm dismissing this astrology thing, do I actually know what I'm dismissing? Am I actually do I actually have a clue as to what I'm talking about? And why am I dismissing it? So yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's go back to the after you were told you're going to be a spiritual teacher.
Oh God. Um,
So yeah, what like how did things unfold after that kind of first reading?
right. So, okay, the other thing that I think is connected because he was I can't remember the details of that bit, but I remember that he was completely struck, and this is where I think the first awakening comes in.
Mm.
Because he said to me, he asked me a lot of questions about how, in terms of how I viewed life now and how I saw life now. But not just that, he looked at my chart. I think he was looking at progress chart at that point. I don't know. But anyway, he said, how did you get over everything you've been through?
Oh wow.
I said, I didn't really get over anything.
Mm.
And he's like, tell me more. You know what I mean?
Mm.
He's like, he said, because it's almost like there's this really tough life, in particular
Mm.
emotionally,
Mm.
like almost like the first half of life. And then there's like something, and then it's like, not that it's like a smooth ride for the rest of my life, but it's like there's such a striking change.
Oh wow. So you could see
Um,
that like you can see
yeah,
that something
so
shifts in the chart or yeah.
I don't know what I'm only guessing that maybe he was looking at the progressed chart, which looks at sort of like a more of a bigger picture,
Okay.
even a more bigger picture
Yeah.
than like the birth chart, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know because I don't, you know, I would ask him, I would ask him so many different questions, you know, now that
Mm.
I know so much more about, you know, astrology, um, but I remember that he was completely struck by, like, what did you do? Did you go to therapy?
Mhm.
What did you do? Did you work through this? Or like, you know, because he said, I don't know how someone who had gone through what you've gone through comes out on the other side like nothing happened.
Mhm.
Something like that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And, you know, and I didn't even know, it didn't even occur to me to tell him, hey, I had an awakening.
Yeah, yeah.
Or so, like, it didn't even occur to
Oh, so
me.
you didn't even make that connection.
I didn't even make the connection. I mean, that's how
That's crazy.
unspiritual and
Yeah,
clue, you know, completely
yeah.
clueless I was as to the impact of
Yeah.
the first awakening. And actually, Kyle, I have to say that it took writing the second book
Right.
that, so it's only been this year, a little bit of last year and this year mostly, where I realized that my first awakening was actually way more powerful and impactful than I ever thought it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Way more.
Wow.
So it's kind of funny that that so many other shifts happened
Yeah.
afterwards that usually I consider, you know, the big ones
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
the blah blah blah, yeah. And it's true to an extent, there's truth to it,
Mm, mm,
but it's funny that even after all those shifts,
mm.
I actually come to the conclusion that that first awakening was actually massive.
Yeah,
Was way more massive than I ever thought it was.
yeah.
In retrospect. So yeah, so I remember that. I remember that, yeah, I completely moved on from like the spiritual teacher. I mean, that honestly, I tell you, that cracked me up. I actually laughed. I laughed for weeks about it. I was just like telling my friends, I was like, can you imagine I'm gonna sit in these robes and like crystals in my ears and like, you know, it's just,
And now they're
it was
laughing at
like,
you like, oh, Maggie, you're a spiritual teacher now.
well, I'm still not a spiritual teacher. I genuinely do not consider myself a spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
I feel that if that becomes a role, it's probably gonna be years from now. That's what I sense, you know, that
Really?
where I will maybe feel comfortable, or I mean, again, I'm totally like, I don't even know why I'm speculating like this, but I just can't see it at the moment. Like it
Mm.
just doesn't feel, and it's kind of funny because like you called me like a professional astrologer, which I am, but it's like, who is he talking about?
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like these labels just don't like, we don't think about it
Yeah,
in that sense. Like I don't know what I would
yeah.
call what I do either. And I'm just like if somebody
Yeah,
says something,
exactly.
I'd be like,
And by the, yeah,
yeah.
by the way, I have absolutely no problem with labels. I have absolutely no problems with labels. I can call myself all sorts of things, no problem. It's just so funny that like that sort of importance of this stuff, the weight of this stuff is just, I just do astrology, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's just like, but like professional astrologer, like I can see like how even that like can be like this big sort of identity around this,
exactly,
you know,
right.
which I don't have. So
Yeah.
and the same, so that same goes to you know, like the spiritual teacher. I genuinely, I'm not being cute or I'm not being humble here or anything like that. I genuinely don't see myself as a spiritual teacher. I just don't.
But I feel like it could be what it was meant by, like, the label might not be there, but I feel like just doing like inquiry sessions with people, like,
yeah, so to me this is different. You see, to me this is different because like,
so you think he actually meant something different than what you're currently doing? Like, this doesn't classify as that.
I think he meant spiritual teacher. Because the way he said it, and he said it was such a certainty, and like in terms of like, he actually didn't even say spiritual teacher. He actually said spiritual leader.
Leader. Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be different. Yeah, because that's like a
right.
Yeah.
So, but I have to take the teacher away from the equation because at this point, I can't relate. I really, there's nothing in me that sees myself as in a teaching role in that sense.
Your second book hasn't launched yet. Once that goes,
it hasn't.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm not
then Maggie, the famous author, spiritual leader.
Then I'm gonna be the spiritual leader. In fact, exactly. I'm going to write in my bio that I am a spiritual leader because my astrologer told me.
Put that on your book. Okay, book by Maggie G. Bracket spiritual leader. Because your first book had PhD. Now you must sub that with spiritual leader.
No, I'm gonna put the PhD and spiritual leader.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Because I mean, double whammy. Hey, listen,
you can't waste.
You want to have that impact, right? Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is actually quite interesting. I'm talking about things that are sort of, am I to a certain extent, am I a natural kind of born teacher? For sure, because I have Sagittarius rising. Sagittarius usually are very kind of generally knowledge, learning, teaching oriented, right? I have Jupiter in the 9th house of higher education, spirituality in Leo, which is like the leadership. So now I understand why he did those delineations.
Yeah, that's what he was looking at, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know, I taught at university, you know what I mean? And I saw myself as a teacher. And but it was sort of natural. There was no kind of like, yeah, I'm a teacher for now, you know, please, I'm a teacher. Whereas when it comes to like being spiritual teacher, I don't see myself as that. That is not to say that I won't be. That is not to say where there comes a point where just like I do astrology, I teach whatever I teach in terms of like spirituality. Very possible. So there's no part of me also that is sort of fighting anything or like denying anything. Not at all. I'm just saying at this point, I don't see myself as that. But to me, there's also a difference between being a teacher and being like the work that I do one-on-one.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's very different because here in the one-on-one, it's basically a guidance, guiding, supporting role.
Yeah, like facilitation or
which I totally, which of course that's what I
and that
feel,
resonates.
That's what I do. That resonates. This is what I do. And of course, I can only do that because I've gone places. I've been through this, I've been through that, and you know, we talked about it, right? So had I not had those experiences, had I not gone through all those stages, then I would not be able to be in that role. So right, because like, you know, we only know what we know. So in that sense, you know, I even actually talked about it to someone that, you know, about my book, and I was saying that it's not even a book about awakening. I'm not an authority on awakening or anything like that, but I do speak from authority of my experience. Right?
Yeah.
That's the only authority that I have, that I know
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of what I've been through, and I can speak both with authority about that, and I can speak from authority in that there's zero doubt anymore in terms of what was seen, and to the point that I genuinely, if someone questioned my level of awakening or like whatever,
Yeah.
I'm totally comfortable with that, because
Yeah.
I really just don't need to defend or prove where I'm at, because
Yeah.
so that's the kind of authority that I'm talking about.
Right.
So that's where I show up at work for, like, in one-on-one with people, and that's the role that currently is, like, I can
Yeah, the
resonate.
resonates with what you're
Whereas, for
doing. Yeah.
example, to me, when I think of a spiritual teacher, I think Angelo. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
immediately, Angelo, or
Yeah, and I suppose it's different, like running retreats and like, yeah, making all
right?
the, yeah,
But
yeah.
also, even the way he is so good at,
Yeah,
he's very teacher-like. I mean, he has
yeah.
this very he has plenty of
And he understands the whole process, like
he understands the whole process, but it's beyond that, because, for example, I can understand the whole process,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I'm not going to be very good at guiding people through that process, or I'm not going to be good at pointing them to an aspect of something the way he is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, for example, because a lot of he's so good when it comes to, like, the mechanics of various
Yeah.
experiences, and
Yeah.
then he has these different methods, teacher-like,
Yeah, true. Yeah.
to point you where you need to be pointed to
Yeah.
in a particular,
Yeah,
but
that's true, very true. That having come up with specific methods to help people kind of go through the process. Yeah,
right.
that's a very teacher
But
like thing.
he's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
good at it that
Yeah,
he's
it's incredible.
natural.
Yeah.
He's
It's
natural.
so
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Because yes, you can learn a lot of methods, but I mean, it's like with astrology. When I started, it took me no time to learn.
Right, right,
And
right.
it was so, I can't say it was it was like I was learning something that I already knew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it was more like reminding myself,
Yes, right,
you
right.
know? But that's like my gift. Whereas
Yeah.
Angela
Could
is,
could you see that? I don't know if you want to share it, but like, was there the same kind of spiritual teacher stuff? Could you see that in Angelo's chart? Or
I can't talk about his
you
chart.
can't talk about
Yeah,
it,
no.
not even the good stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't, not even about good stuff. But no, I just, that's just generally my rule, that I just, like, don't talk about
Yeah,
other
yeah.
people's charts unless they're dead, then fine. But like, I don't know, some celebrity charts or something like that, who are no longer with us. But yeah, I would say, so, like, he's very good with coming up with methods, like, naturally. He's got such clarity, like, very methodical is what I'm trying to say.
Right,
And
right. Yeah, yeah.
this is very teacher-like, So then he can replicate a lot of these things, and he knows when and how and so on, So I mean, that's, yeah. Whereas my one-on-one work is, like, just completely different. Sometimes it combines astrology, sometimes it doesn't, it depends. But I don't have, at least as of yet, any kind of particular method,
Yeah.
or technique or something that I use with everybody, for example,
Right,
or
right.
something like that, So this is one of the many reasons why I don't consider myself, at least not at this point, a teacher. You know
Right.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, so not a spiritual teacher,
not a spiritual teacher, not a spiritual leader.
not a spiritual leader.
Yeah. For sure. Not even particularly into spirituality, I must say, still. Like, I mean, I know it will probably sound slightly crazy to some people, because, like, hold on a minute, you've had this awakenings, whatever, so how can you not be into spirituality? But what I mean specifically by that is that I'm not really into any particular philosophy, any particular
Yeah,
tradition. I'm not following a particular teacher, that I'm kind of
But I think
how
you're
would you say,
past that, like,
devoted to.
but like that's before the bigger shifts, wouldn't you say? Like once you just kind of live from, intuition and stuff later on,
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
you
I mean,
say? Or
even
like,
I would say that even when the shift started and I came across non-duality and stuff like
mm,
that, you know,
mm,
I still didn't wish to be part of any community. I still
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
wish to
yeah,
become part of any, like, be associated with any tradition.
yeah,
And I certainly was not, there are teachers I respect and would listen to, but I would
mm,
never be a follower or like
yeah, yeah,
devote myself to them, or like,
yeah,
whatever, like none of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which, but I think that's like yeah, because it's the same for me, right? I've never been like, I've had like, for me, like Angelo has been somebody who I've loved his work, but I've heard other people's, because I mentioned him a lot in my content, so like, oh, Angelo was your teacher, and I was like, yeah, I mean, not, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like I like his stuff and all of that, but I feel like that's a key part of, that what maybe will keep some people stuck from going really much deeper with it is like an attachment to, like those kinds of things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Like,
Yeah. So that's why it
for
doesn't
me,
surprise me at all if you say like there's none of that. I'm like, yeah, but it's like, why would there
yeah,
still
I've
be
never
none of
heard of
that?
that. So like,
Yeah.
even the idea of going to like a retreat, like meditation
Right.
retreat, is
Yeah.
like I would never go do
Yeah.
that, because there's gonna be a community, and there's gonna be some kind of a
Yeah.
group
There's gonna be
thing, and there's
dogma
gonna
as
be some
well.
kind of expectation to behave a certain way, and I'm just
Yeah.
not, like, I am not very good in complying to.
It's so funny.
Yeah,
Because I've been to retreats in the past because I just wanted a space to meditate
yeah,
deeper, and I've thought of going back, and I'm just like, it just doesn't, like, the whole idea of like dogma and a teacher and somebody telling me where to go, and I'm just like, nah,
yeah.
it's just,
And by the way, like, I'm not even saying that this has to be like that. Like, I'm
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
saying it's just not my thing. I
yeah,
am
yeah,
not just not, the limited experience that I've had with groups of
mm,
any kind, um it's just not my thing. It's just
mm,
not. It doesn't mean that I'm like, I have to be rebellious all the time, or like,
mm,
I have to announce to everybody how, I'm not complying to anything, or because I'm so special and different and
mm,
difficult, or whatever. That's not what I mean. It's just not my thing. I'm very much a loner. I go where I go, when I go, I read
mm,
what I want to read, and it's like, and even just recently I interviewed someone, and she was talking about a lot about how even within like Vipassana communities, there was like a competition, and there was like, it was
oh
not
yeah,
okay to go to another Vipassana retreat.
there's
And
a
I'm
lot
like,
of that
why?
in
You know what I mean?
Vipassana. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Like, for me, it's like, there's just stuff that it's precisely stuff like that. Like, for
yeah,
example,
yeah,
if I ended up in a community, or with a teacher community, where I'm being discouraged openly from
mm,
exploring other teachers or other
yeah, yeah, yeah.
traditions, I'd be out
Yeah,
that
that's
day.
like such a red
Yeah.
flag, or like
I'd be
just such
out
a
that
turn
day.
off. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
same.
immediately.
Yeah,
Right. So hold on. We're talking about astrology, or we're talking Vipassana retreats. Hold on. Um, let me
let's.
think where to take this.
I mean, I'm enjoying the astrology stuff the most, like, because I'm so curious about it now. So I
Yeah.
want to tap
So
into
so
your kind of
okay.
astrology knowledge and all of that. Yeah.